Have you ever heard your dog barking at what you thought was nothing? Well, one girl thought the same thing, until she looked outside and realized someone was already watching her window. This story is about Leah, a 24-year-old college student who lived alone in a ground-floor apartment. One night, around 2:30 in the morning, she was woken up by her dog, Max. He was barking frantically at the window, and Max wasn't the type to bark without a reason. Leah's first thought was that maybe a raccoon or some other animal had wandered into the small yard. Annoyed, but a little on edge, she got out of bed to check. She crept over to the window and slowly peeked through the blinds, and that's when her blood ran cold. There was a man standing in her yard. He was near the back fence, perfectly still, just staring directly up at her window. Leah's heart slammed against her ribs. The faint glow from a street lamp cast an eerie light on his face. She could make out his pale skin and eyes that were wide open, unblinking. He looked almost like a mannequin, completely lifeless, yet she had this terrifying feeling that he knew she was there, that he knew she was watching him. She tried to shush Max, whispering his name to quiet him down before he gave her away. But then the man did something that made her freeze. He tilted his head ever so slowly, as if he had heard her whisper from all the way across the yard. It was a completely unnatural movement. Panic set in. Leah stumbled backward from the window, her hand fumbling for her phone on the nightstand. But just as her fingers wrapped around it, a new sound cut through the air. A faint metallic click. The sound of her backyard gate unlatching. Her breath hitched in her throat. The squeak of the old metal hinge echoed in the dead silence of her apartment. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial 911. When the operator answered, Leah could only manage a choked whisper, telling them someone was in her yard trying to get in. Every second felt like an eternity. She stayed on the line with the dispatcher, her eyes glued to the back door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. "The police are on their way, ma'am," the operator said, trying to keep her calm. But just as those words left her lips, there was a loud, heavy thump against her back door. Leah let out a scream she couldn't hold back. Max went absolutely ballistic, barking and growling furiously at the door. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything went silent. Complete and utter silence. A few minutes later, the flashing blue and red lights of the police cars filled her apartment. The officers were quick and professional. They searched the entire area, the yard, the street, everywhere. But the man was gone, vanished. Here's where it gets even stranger. The ground in her yard was soft from a recent rain, but the police found no footprints. None at all. The only sign that anyone had been there was the gate, which was still swinging gently back and forth in the breeze. It was as if someone had opened it without ever taking a single step. Leah has never been the same since that night. She told the police, and she still tells this story to anyone who will listen, that she swears the man's eyes were glowing with a faint white light. She even had a security camera pointed at her yard. But when she checked the footage, it had frozen. The timestamp on the last recorded frame read 2:31 a.m., the exact moment she heard the gate open. To this day, no one knows who that man was or what he wanted. This story will send a chill down your spine, so make sure you're not watching alone. Ryan and his wife, let's call them Sarah, had just welcomed their first child into the world. It was a beautiful, chaotic, and utterly joyful time. Like many new parents, they wanted to make sure their baby was safe at all times, especially at night. So they invested in one of those modern, smart baby monitors. You know, the kind that connects to your Wi-Fi and you can pull up a live feed on your phone from anywhere in the house. It was supposed to be a tool for reassurance, a way to calm their new parent anxieties. For the first few months, everything was perfect. The monitor worked exactly as it should. They could see their little one sleeping soundly, hear every tiny coo and gurgle. It became a comforting routine. If the baby stirred, they'd glance at their phones, see that everything was fine, and go back to sleep. It gave them a sense of control and security, but that feeling of safety was about to be completely shattered. One night, things took a terrifying turn. It was late, creeping up on 3 in the morning. Ryan was downstairs, catching up on a TV show he'd missed, trying to unwind before heading to bed. Sarah and the baby were fast asleep upstairs. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the dialogue from the show. Suddenly, a faint sound cut through the silence. It was a crackling static, coming from the baby monitor receiver he kept on the coffee table. He muted the TV and listened. The static was intermittent, like a bad radio signal. He figured it was just some interference, maybe from a neighbor's Wi-Fi or a passing truck. He was about to ignore it when another sound came through the speaker. A voice. It was soft, raspy, and definitely not his wife's. It wasn't his voice either. It was the whisper of an old woman, a chilling, wheezing sound that made the hair on his arms stand up. The words she spoke were even more horrifying. "Don't cry," the voice whispered. "He's watching you sleep." Ryan's blood ran cold. He froze, his eyes locked on the receiver. Who was he? Who was this woman? He grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling as he opened the baby monitor app. The video feed loaded, showing the nursery. The baby was perfectly still, fast asleep in the crib, looking peaceful and quiet. There was no one else in the room. The scene on his screen was completely normal, a stark contrast to the terror he felt. His mind was racing. Was he hearing things? Was he just overtired? But the voice had been so clear, so distinct. He couldn't shake it. Adrenaline surged through him. He shot up from the couch and sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. He burst into the nursery, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum. The room was still, silent. He scanned every corner, his eyes darting around frantically. He checked the closet empty. He checked the window. It was locked from the inside. There was absolutely no one there. No sign of entry, no explanation for the voice. He let out a shaky breath, trying to calm himself down. Maybe it was a glitch, a bizarre, terrifying glitch. As he turned to leave the room, feeling a mixture of relief and confusion, something caught his eye. The baby monitor camera, mounted on the wall opposite the crib, moved. It was a small, almost imperceptible tilt, panning slightly to the right. It was the exact motion someone would make if they were adjusting the view, as if an unseen hand had just touched it. That was it. Ryan didn't hesitate. He ripped the camera from the wall, yanking the cord out with it. He didn't care if he broke it. He just wanted it out. He stood there in the dark nursery, holding the disconnected camera, his heart still hammering in his chest. The next morning, exhausted and on edge, he called the company that made the monitor. He explained the situation, the voice, the camera moving on its own. He was convinced their system had been hacked. Someone had gained access to their camera and was tormenting them. But the support agent checked their logs and found nothing. They assured him the camera hadn't been connected to any other account. There was no record of a security breach, no sign of a hack, no unauthorized access whatsoever. According to their system, everything was secure. This only made Ryan more uneasy. If it wasn't a hacker, what was it? Later that day, still trying to make sense of it all, he decided to check the saved video playback from the previous night. The monitor automatically recorded short clips when it detected motion or sound. He scrolled through the files until he found the recording from around 3 a.m. He watched the clip, his stomach in knots. The video showed the baby sleeping peacefully. But then, for a single, terrifying frame, he saw it. In the corner of the video, standing near the crib, was a faint, shadowy outline. It was the figure of a woman. She was just standing there, watching the baby. Her form was translucent, almost see-through, but her eyes looked dark and hollow. It was only there for a split second before vanishing. Ryan's hands shook as he looked at the file's timestamp. 3:03 a.m., the exact moment he had heard the old woman's voice whisper through the monitor. They never plugged that baby monitor back in. Have you ever heard a sound that just chills you to the bone? A sound you can't explain, but, isn't right? This story comes from a Reddit user who worked for a city maintenance team, and what he experienced in a dark, forgotten tunnel will make you question what's real and what isn't. His job was pretty routine, cleaning out old drainage tunnels. These weren't just small pipes. Some of them were massive concrete tubes that ran for miles under highways and city streets. Dark, damp, and usually filled with nothing more than echoes and grime. But one particular tunnel, it had something else waiting inside. It was a long drainage tunnel that ran for nearly a mile under a busy highway. He and his crew were tasked with inspecting it for blockages. He drew the short straw and had to walk the entire length to the far end. Armed with a heavy-duty flashlight, he ventured in. The air grew cold and heavy. The only sounds were his boots splashing in the shallow water and the distant hum of traffic overhead. As he got deeper, about halfway through, he heard it. A faint sound like soft crying. He stopped, listening intently. It sounded like a little girl. At first he brushed it off. Tunnels play tricks on your ears. Echoes can travel in strange ways. Maybe it was a child playing near an open manhole cover somewhere up above, but the sound didn't fade or change. It was a consistent rhythmic sobbing, a sound of pure despair. "Hello?" he yelled out, his voice bouncing off the curved concrete walls. "Is anyone down here?" Silence. For a moment he thought he'd imagined it. But then the crying started again, and this time it was closer, louder. A wave of unease washed over him. He was a mile underground, in a place no one should be. He gripped his flashlight tighter and continued walking, pushing against the fear that was building in his chest. He had to make sure no one was trapped. The sobs grew louder with every step he took, echoing in a way that felt unnatural. And then his flashlight beam landed on something. About 50 feet ahead, a small figure was sitting in the ankle-deep water. It was a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with her head buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with each sob. Relief mixed with confusion. How did a child get all the way down here? "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted. "Are you lost?" She didn't respond. She didn't even seem to notice him. She just kept crying. He started walking toward her, his boots making loud splashes in the dark water. "Don't worry, I'm here to help," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. He was only about 10 feet away now. He could see her drenched clothes and long, dark hair plastered to her skin. He called out one more time. And that's when she stopped crying. Everything went completely silent except for the dripping water. Slowly, she lifted her head from her hands and turned to face him. His heart stopped. Her face was deathly pale, streaked with grime and water. But her eyes, they were completely, unnaturally black. 2 solid orbs of darkness, devoid of any white, any iris, any pupil. They were just empty voids staring right through him. A primal fear he'd never known seized him. He didn't scream. He didn't even breathe. He just dropped his flashlight into the water, plunging himself into near total darkness. He scrambled backward, slipping and falling in the slick tunnel, and then turned and ran. He ran blindly, fueled by pure terror, splashing through the darkness toward the tiny pinprick of light that was the tunnel entrance. He burst out into the blinding sunlight, gasping for air, his heart hammering against his ribs. His crew saw his state and immediately called the police. An official search of the tunnel was conducted. They went through every inch of it. They found his flashlight lying in the water right where he dropped it. But there was no sign of a girl. No footprints other than his own. Nothing. The story could have ended there, as a strange hallucination brought on by the dark and the isolation. But when he told the story to some of the older locals, their faces went pale. They told him that 20 years ago, during a massive flash flood, a little girl had been playing near an open drain and was swept into that very tunnel. She was never seen again. The user quit his job not long after that. To this day, he swears that whenever he has to drive over that specific section of highway at night, if he listens closely, he can still hear the faint, heartbreaking sound of a little girl crying, lost in the darkness below. What do you think he saw down there? Let me know in the comments. This comes from a truck driver, a seasoned vet of the road, who was hauling a load through the empty stretches of rural Arizona. If you've ever driven through there, you know what I'm talking about. It's just miles and miles of desert, dark and silent. The kind of place where your headlights are the only thing cutting through an ocean of black. It was late, probably around 1 in the morning. The only sound was the hum of his engine and the rumble of his tires on the asphalt. He was in that hypnotic state you get into on long, straight roads, just keeping his eyes peeled for deer or other animals. And that's when he saw it. Up ahead, a dark shape was lying stretched across his lane. His first thought was, "Oh no, a deer." So he started to slow down, easing off the gas and getting ready to brake. As he got closer, he flicked on his high beams to get a better look, and his heart just dropped into his stomach. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. A man lying face down right in the middle of the highway. He was wearing what looked like regular street clothes. What was someone doing out here in the middle of nowhere at this hour lying on the road? The driver brought his massive rig to a complete stop, maybe about 20 feet away. The whole situation was screaming wrong. His training kicked in, and his first move was to grab his CB radio and call for help. He reported his location and the situation, his voice probably shaking a little. He decided he couldn't just leave the guy there, so he cautiously opened his cab door and stepped out onto the pavement. The air was cold and dead quiet. He took a step forward, his hand still on the truck door, and called out, "Hey, you okay? Sir, can you hear me?" And that's when it happened. The body on the ground twitched. Just once, a sudden, violent jerk. It was so unnatural it made the driver freeze. Before he could even process what he saw, the man on the road was standing up. But he didn't get up like a normal person would, pushing themselves up with their arms. No, he rose to his feet in a single, fluid, impossibly fast motion. It was like he was being pulled upright by invisible strings. The figure then started walking toward the truck. But the walk, it was all wrong. It was jerky and disjointed. His limbs moved at odd angles like a marionette with a clumsy puppeteer. Every step was a spastic, unnatural lurch. There was no humanity in the movement, just this horrifying mechanical gait. Pure, cold panic washed over the driver. Every instinct in his body screamed danger. He didn't hesitate. He scrambled back into his cab, slammed the door shut, and hit the locks. His hands were fumbling as he threw the truck into gear and stomped on the accelerator. The engine roared to life and the truck lurched forward. As he sped away, he glanced in his side mirror. What he saw is what truly haunts him to this day. The figure wasn't walking anymore. It was running, sprinting, and it was keeping pace with his accelerating truck. Its limbs were flailing wildly as it ran, moving faster than any human should be able to move. It was a full-on, terrifying sprint right on his tail. He pushed the truck faster and faster, his eyes glued to the mirror, watching this thing chase him down a deserted highway. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, the figure just vanished. One moment it was there, a nightmarish silhouette in his mirror, and the next it was gone. He didn't stop driving. He floored it for another 20 miles before he felt safe enough to even ease up on the gas. Later, the police did show up to check out the area, he reported. They searched the highway and the surrounding desert. They didn't find anyone. No man, no body, nothing. But they did find something else. Right where the driver said the man had been lying, there were drag marks in the dirt on the shoulder of the road. Long, deep grooves, as if something heavy had been pulled from the road into the desert. The police followed these drag marks. And at the very end of them, they found a set of footprints. The footprints just went a few paces into the desert sand and then they just stopped. They didn't lead anywhere. They just ended, as if whatever made them had simply ceased to exist. So what did he see out there? A prank? A trap? Or something else entirely? Something that haunts the empty roads when the sun goes down. Thanks for listening, and if you have any stories like this, I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.